The man came through the tent flap carrying the child the way you carry something you have no intention of putting down. He was Velhari, ash pale, membrane-thin skin across the cheekbones. The double-jointed gait that meant every step was a conscious decision. And he was bleeding from somewhere, couldn't see yet. The child was small against his chest. She had her face pressed into the hollow of his neck, and she was not making a sound. I had him on the table in under a minute. The wound was a bolt lance puncture, low and left, the kind that burns as it enters and then opens slowly, fist unclenching. I have worked trauma posts on 4 worlds, and I have never found a good way to fix that particular injury. I worked anyway. You always work. He stayed conscious for 11 minutes. I know because I was watching the clock on the tent pole the way you do when you are trying to buy time, and you know the account is nearly empty. He used those 11 minutes to hold the child's hand and say something to her in Velhari that I did not have enough of the language to follow. Whatever it was, she listened. She did not cry. She just held his hand and listened, and when he stopped talking, she kept holding it. He died at the 12th minute. She sat beside him for a long time after. I let her. There is nothing in the field manual about what to do when a child of another species loses the only person they came in with, but I have always believed that the first rule of medicine is to cause no additional harm, and pulling her away from him would have been harm. So I pulled a camp stool next to the table, close enough that she knew I was there, and I waited. After a while, she looked at me, amber eyes, the Velhari kind. The iris nearly fills the whole visible surface, so you feel looked at more completely than you are used to. I nodded at her. She nodded back, very small, very careful. That was the beginning of it. Her name, or the closest I could get my mouth around, was something like Sival. She was young. I will not try to be more specific than that, because I am a medic, not an immigration clerk, and her age was not the relevant data. The relevant data was that she was small, she had no one, and she was sitting in my aid station on a rope bridge pass in the Cathara Reach with the wind coming off the high peaks and nobody in the world who knew where she was. Put her in the recovery corner, with a blanket and a tin cup of broth, and I went to file the death with the pass authority. Standard procedure. What I did not file was her presence, because the pass authority here routes everything to the Reach Council, and the Reach Council has a standing agreement with 3 noble houses, and I had already seen enough of the Cathara Reach to know that information, once given to the council, arrives at the house it's most useful to inside of a day. I have a friend who calls this instinct. I call it arithmetic. They came on the 3rd day. 2 of them. Traveling clothes, the kind of compact and expressionless men who have learned that expressionlessness is, itself a kind of pressure. They showed me papers from the House of Veraith, which is one of the 3 I had mentioned. The papers said the child was a ward of the house pending legal determination of her status following the death of her caretaker. They used the word retrieval. I read the papers twice, then I handed them back. She's a patient, I said. She's under medical care. She appears healthy, the first one said. She experienced acute traumatic bereavement 3 days ago. That's a medical condition. We have authorization. You have paper, I said. Authorization requires my signature too, and I haven't given it. They left. They were not surprised. I think they had expected that response, and had simply been required to attempt the polite version first. I watched them cross the rope bridge from the tent flap, and I felt Sival standing just behind my left shoulder. I did not look at her. I said. In the 11 words of Velhari, I had managed to piece together the phrase that translates approximately as, "You stay. This place is safe." My pronunciation is poor. She understood anyway. The second visit came the next afternoon with a council official, added to the party, a thin woman, with a ledger and the particular quality of impatience that belongs to people who have never been told no, by someone they considered beneath them. She explained the legal framework. She explained the house's interest in the child's welfare. She used the word welfare 4 times in 6 sentences. She told me everything I needed to know about who was actually going to benefit. I'd like to see the welfare provisions, I said, specifically where she'll sleep, who's responsible for her care, and what the legal mechanism is for her to leave house custody if she chooses. The ledger woman blinked. She's a child. She doesn't. Then I'd like to see what mechanism exists for a designated guardian to advocate for her. Exit from house custody. You are not her designated guardian. I'm the presiding medical officer of this station, I said. And she is my patient. And under Reach Humanitarian Compact Article 9, a presiding medical officer may hold any patient in protective care pending independent welfare review. I'm requesting that review, in writing, today. She wrote it down. Her hand was not entirely steady. They left. Saval was watching me from the recovery corner. I went and sat on the camp stool, the same one, in the same place I had sat the morning her caretaker died. She looked at me for a long time with those full amber eyes. Then she reached out and put her small pale hand over my wrist and held it there. I don't have children. I have a medical degree and a series of postings on difficult worlds, and a particular inability to walk away from a situation that seems to me to be wrong. I am not a warm man by nature, but I sat there with her hand on my wrist, and I felt something settle in me the way a load-bearing wall settles. Not dramatically, not with any noise. Just solid and not moving. They came back that night. For this time, no ledger woman, pretense of paperwork. They had a lamp, and they had the kind of purpose that does not bother to knock. I was standing at the tent entrance when they arrived. I had my scalpel in my coat pocket. Not because I planned to use it, because a man standing at a threshold should have something in his pocket. That means he made a decision before they got there. I also had, behind me, one Vilhari child of indeterminate age who had wrapped herself in a camp blanket and was, by the sound of it, entirely composed. Last chance, the first man said. To do this without difficulty. I thought about the 11 minutes. I thought about a man using the last of himself to say something to a child that I hadn't understood but she had. I thought about what return to house custody means when nobody can tell you where she'll sleep. No, I said. It is a small word. It doesn't sound like much. But I have found, in my years of working difficult posts on difficult worlds, that when you say it quietly enough and you don't move, it has a weight to it that longer words don't always manage. I didn't have to use the scalpel. What I had was a tent full of 6 recovering patients who had apparently been listening. 3 of them Velhari, 2 of them Cathara, ridge workers with the build that comes from hauling freight lines across high passes, and one of them a retired Reach Council arbitrator who turned out to have a very specific and current memory of Compact Article 9. What I had was a pass authority runner I had sent an hour earlier with a written welfare review request, which meant there was now a formal record that these men had arrived after the request was filed. What I had was the simple, durable fact that I was not going to move. They left. They did not come back. The welfare review took 11 days. The arbitrator, who happened to be recovering from a tibial fracture in my tent, wrote the primary brief. Saval sat beside him some mornings while he worked, looking at the pages with the careful attention she had given everything since the night she arrived, and once I saw this, though I did not comment on it. He showed her where her name appeared in the document, and she put her finger on it and held it there for a moment. I don't know what she understood. I know what I understood. On the 12th day, provisional guardianship was registered in my name, which is a thing I had not planned on and have not once regretted. She is not small anymore. She is studying medicine now, which surprised me until I thought about it, and then it didn't surprise me at all. She has her mother's eyes, the full amber kind, and her father's way of being still when things are difficult, which I recognize because I watched him use it at the end. And she has, I think, few things she picked up in a field tent on a mountain pass from a man who was not especially warm by nature, and not especially brave, who happened to believe that no is a load-bearing word. You hold it steady. You don't move. That's usually enough.